Hey, it's Dave Johan once again for the Boxing Voice. Pleased to be joined by our newest correspondent, Rao Hokum. How are you, Rao?
I'm fab. You?
I'm good. I'm good. You're joining us for a special episode reviewing Rocky 4, Rocky versus Drago. We've had the pleasure of watching this 80s classic, shall we just say as well, full of kitsch and things that we remember from both of our childhoods, and I'm eager to discuss this with yourself, and hopefully give a decision at the end of this. Should viewers watch this? Look, before we get into that as well, we've just had a big Dazn card over the weekend. We're now looking forward to fights in 2022. Ro, what are you looking forward to most in 2022? Which fight? Or fights, should we just say?
The three Sky Sports shows which have already been announced. Obviously, the Eubank v Williams one. I hope you send me to that. I want a night out in Cardiff. Obviously, Josh Taylor as well. Had the pleasure of meeting him at the press tour the other week. Would like to go to Glasgow as well. And of course, Khan v Brook. That's huge, irrespective of what the naysayers say. Those are the fights that we obviously know are happening. The ones which might happen, Fury v White, huge fight. Build-up's going to be great fun, I think. Whatever the outcome in the ring, build-up will be huge. Internationally, the one that's been talked about most, probably Haney v Kambosos Jr. Undisputed lightweight championship, and who knows, might even have a little holiday to Oz if that comes off.
So look, there's loads of fights to get into. Fingers crossed they all come off next year, and and we can look back and be in the position we are next year, saying, "Wow, what a great year it was." Let's get into it. Rocky 4, the ultimate cut. Rocky versus Drago. Initial thoughts, Rob. What did you think of it?
Well, overall, I would say it's probably a downgrade from the original, which I have to say is one of my favourite movies from the 80s. As a child of the 80s who remembers the Cold War, through movies for me, absolute classics for Cold War propaganda. That's Top Gun, Rocky 4 and Rambo 3. At the time, probably seen as jingoistic nonsense, but some of them had some interesting, views that have actually turned out to be important. Looking back at them now. So, the director's cut, some of the stuff they cut, I think was actually important to building the character and the scene of the Drago character, and it sort of explained a lot more about why it was so important with the backdrop of the Cold War. But from a purely boxing point of view, of course, some of the fight scenes they put in actually were more realistic than the nonsensical getting hit with KO punches repeatedly without going down that we were used to seeing from Rocky movies.
Yeah, for myself, my take on it was I liked the angle of pushing the Apollo and Rocky friendship, the bromance as we call it now in the the 21st century, further. So, for example, the way that the movie opened, with a loss to Clubber Lang, Rocky going into Mighty Mix, Apollo following him there, and then creating that journey that he's been there from the Rocky 2.0, should we just say as well? The rebuild. I really like the emphasis more on that as well, which then created more weight onto, no spoilers out there, but I guess everybody knows Apollo Creed, dies. But that created more leverage and made that death more impactful when Drago, ultimately killed Apollo Creed in an exhibition, which sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? To be fair, how we're discussing
I agree
this,
with you. from that point of view, I mean, again, maybe I'm becoming soft in my old age, but some of those, that human aspect of it probably didn't pick up on 20 years ago.
No.
And yeah, this time round I did. And a few things you could actually see as, a bit of the dialogue I actually picked up on. It had quite an accurate insight into real life fighters' mindsets. For example, I think there was, when they were having dinner together, and Rocky's wife, Adrian, she actually pointed out why Apollo Creed is going ahead with this dangerous exhibition. That look, it's not about doing it for America. It's because fighters, they can't bear to be out of the limelight, and he's been out of the limelight for so long. And actually, that is true, because how often do we see it? I mean, we are seeing it now with these fighters that have been retired for more than 5 years, having to come back for the exhibitions. So there was
some even longer as well. Some even longer, right? I mean, Danny Williams, for example, he's still fighting, isn't he?
Exactly, and we had Mike Tyson and Roy Jones doing their exhibition. Evander Holyfield at nearly 60. So yeah, there was interesting sort of insights there. I also liked when Creed was talking about in that initial monologue at the beginning about how much he knows Rocky is hurting from his first defeat, and that if you don't try and put this right, it will stay with you forever. And again, real great insight into the real mindset of fighters. That first defeat, that can haunt fighters. Some of them go off the rails, or they never become, they never are the same. Others become more obsessive about putting it right.
Yeah.
And that's probably the ones that that go on to greatness, as it were.
Absolutely. And it's these things that you don't pick up as, I mean, I was 4 when Rocky I was less than that, actually. I was 3. Yeah, it came out in 85 originally. So I must have watched this when I was about 6 or 7. But you wouldn't pick up these things when you're 6 or 7 years old. You were there for the punches, the great music. You were there for the build up, which was the training montages, and people that haven't amazing. I mean, people that haven't seen this cut of the original, and they're worried, thinking, the training montage is cut, or is Ain't No Easy Way Out, is that gone? No, all the music is in there, all the training montages are in there. There's a few, I think, if I'm right in this as well, some of the montage has been extended as well. So there's a few sort of extra scenes. So you are getting the full package there. And that's what we were invested in. And little things now, when you pick up, you do pick up these extra sort of bits of dialogue. I mean, also, what did you think about the scene when Rocky goes to the Boxing Board of Commission and pitches that he'll be fighting on Christmas Day with no purse against the Soviets? What did you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, what was it? The New York State Athletic Commission? I don't know. Yeah, obviously it was complete nonsense, weren't it?
Yeah, I mean, the realism, put that to a side. I mean, we know it's fiction, but it doesn't need to be realistic for this kind of film.
Again, like you said, it's that 80s kitsch, corny, cliche type scene, which is almost a prerequisite for a Cold War 80s movie. So yeah, that was funny. I'll tell you what I was a bit disappointed about in terms of what they decided to cut was a lot of the dialogue they had with Bridget Nielsen's character, Drago's wife.
Yeah.
Because it was at that first press conference where they set the scene a little bit about Drago the fighter. and they cut that out. And I actually think that was an important part of it, not necessarily to add to the story, but more because it showed what foresight Stallone had in writing the Drago character, because he was billed as an amateur who was 100-0 with 100 KOs, an Olympic gold medalist, and he was going to obviously eventually fought the heavyweight champ in his pro fight. He stood 6'5" and 260 pounds. Now, all of that back in the 80s sounded fantastically unlikely, but modern events actually have shown that character is not so unlikely, because we've seen guys like Lomachenko with incredible amateur records. And of course, the modern heavyweights, they are that size now, aren't they? Yeah, it was often, I think a lot of the critics at the time said, you know, liberals especially said, oh, it's just, you know, American propaganda. But in actual fact, I mean, as someone who's been to the USSR, showing my age there, albeit as a child, I can confirm that Soviet officers, they are all like that, or they were all like that. Utterly grim-faced, square-jawed. I mean, I suppose living under communism is likely to make anyone utterly humorless, isn't it? But certainly they did all look like Ivan Drago and have that manner. And of course, you know, someone like, you could say, Vitaly Klitschko was very much cut from that sort of mold, wasn't he? So I thought that it was disappointing they cut a lot of that sort of background about Drago out. I thought it did add something to setting the scene as to who he is.
Were you pleased, though, and be honest on this one, that Paulie and his robot, the relationship there was cut? I like the idea of the robot. It was completely bizarre. That relationship, if you want to call it that, was completely off the charts. A WTF moment, thinking, we've got a robot which is running around in the Balboa mansion.
Can't say I missed that at all.
Yeah, that was completely memeable, if there was such a thing. And just completely out of place, wasn't it, Ra, in the original film? Like, what the hell? And you didn't mind it as a child because you just didn't question it.
I can't remember what was the rating for the movie 30 years ago, because presumably was that thrown in as a sop for the children? I don't know.
Bizarre choice, wasn't it?
Very, very, very bizarre. Can't say that was missed at all.
Yeah, and it was good that it is gone. I mean, in doing so, though, it's fair to say the Paulie character, the brother-in-law, who's very relevant in the first two Rocky films, very relevant. You know, working with the mob as an enforcer, and Rocky 3 played a bit less of a part, but 4, in doing so, in taking the robot out, he's even less of a character, isn't he? There's not much going on there, is there? Which is he was there for what, comedy humor from Rocky 3 onwards.
Yeah, there's always the resident fool who's there for, as you said, the comedy value, if you like. But yeah, he didn't offer much.
No, I mean the other thing, which as I mentioned earlier, the soundtrack is absolutely epic. I mean, it's one of those soundtracks which you think, you know, 36 years later, we're still seeing in ring walks. You know, Carl Froch had Ain't No Easy Way Out when he fought Butte over in Nottingham.
Yeah.
AJ this year, 2021, came out to Ain't No Easy Way Out against Usyk. Obviously, unfortunately, the result never went his way. Tyson Fury, a few years ago, in America, came out to Living in America with Rocky shorts on as well. So
Apollo Creed's outfit, it was.
Yeah, sorry, Apollo Creed, and then he gave the shorts, didn't he, to or he wore the same shorts against against Drago, didn't he? In the ultimate, in the final fight. But the relevance of this film, the Rocky, the underdog tale for the first one, but definitely Rocky 4 for ring walks, for showmanship, for the fact that it's still living on now is important, right? I mean, how relevant is this film?
Absolutely. Like I said, the Drago character, much as it was maligned at the time, it was a fairly accurate foretelling of the future. And you look, even to this day, there's a couple of fighters who are now adopting his persona as part of their shtick. I'm sure you've heard of boxers, Geordie heavyweight prospect, Steve USSR Robinson. And he calls himself that because he looks like Ivan Drago, and so he adopted the Drago look and given himself the USSR nickname in homage to that fictional character. I think Dave Coldwell's bantamweight prospect, Hopi Price, one of his other nicknames is Drago because his name is actually Ivan Price. So incredible that all these years later, that fictional character, he's still having a real impact in the real boxing world.
And it's an interesting take as well. The way I see this film in the Rocky franchise, this director's cut, is it's not a case of the storyline's been changed. How, if we put our film hats on for a second and put our boxing gloves to the side and just be film buffs for a second, where Zack Snyder's New Justice League, that was a completely different film compared to the Justice League that was released on cinemas a few years ago. The New Justice League, for example, is a completely new film from the ground up, and you could argue here with Rocky 4, the original cut, versus the new Rocky versus Drago cut, the ultimate cut, should we just say. There are subtle differences. However, the story remains intact. The soundtrack is still there. It's almost like what George Lucas did with the Star Wars, the remastered trilogy, shall we just say, of the 77 film and Empire Strikes Back and everything. It's a new paint on it, on an old classic, isn't it? Would you say that?
Yeah.
Dramatically changed the story, has it?
I would agree with that. I was actually quite impressed by the technology, that it actually looked almost HD in some scenes. And as you said, the story hasn't changed actually. And in fact, they probably removed as you said, with the robots, the worst part of it. And the extended fight scenes were actually quite impressive as well. So,
I mean, you would definitely urge people to watch this, wouldn't you? Even though you weren't yourself that impressed. Myself, I wasn't looking at it. I was looking at it from a fresh pair of eyes, because Rocky 4 is a movie that I've watched it countless times, but it's not one that I watch every single year or anything like that. When it's on, absolutely, I'll put it on, but I've seen it countless times. I was impressed by the way the story focused, not solely, but from the beginning of the relationship with Apollo and Rocky and the relevance of what that death had to him. So I would definitely tell people to watch it. But a question I was going to ask you as well, with the towel, should Rocky have thrown that in earlier?
Tell you what, for me, that's actually, it was quite a moving scene. The way Apollo Creed turns to him and says, "If you're my friend, you won't throw that towel in, no matter what." It makes you wonder. We've seen in the past year or so someone like Deontay Wilder being so upset with Mark Breland. I wonder, do real fighters like him, do they have that sort of conversation with their coach? Did Wilder have that sort of conversation with Malik Scott? I found that a moving scene. Should he have thrown it in? Of course he should. That's why you shouldn't have your friends in the corner. Should you?
It's a difficult one. Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's loads of questions there, isn't there? The ref, could he have finished it earlier? It's an exhibition. There's loads of stuff going on. But ultimately, the fight scene. There was one thing that I did notice. I said this to you off camera, and it was a little bit disturbing. I don't know if this was in the original cut. Is when there's a part in the movie where Apollo Creed is twitching after I don't know if you noticed that he was literally twitching. And I don't know if that was in the original, which I found a bit disturbing as well in terms of how dangerous Drago was as a person. Quite menacing, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he was of comic book levels of villainy, wasn't he? I mean, that classic line of his, which has become a meme for many mishap, he turns and says, if he dies, he dies. I mean, on social media,
that's your license gone there. Yeah,
that line goes, it's used all over social media for every sort of mishap. So I wonder, has a fighter ever been that callous? I don't think such a fighter has yet come about. Not while the fighter, their opponent, is still twitching on the floor. So
no, absolutely.
Yeah.
What was your best song in the soundtrack, Rob?
Burning Heart.
Yeah. Burning. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I like Burning Heart.
Yeah.
So much so, actually, after the movie, I went onto YouTube and actually kept playing it back with the lyrics running up the screen because I actually wanted to. I mean, the lyrics were actually very Cold War oriented. Not particularly jingoistic. I suppose it was something akin to, do you remember Frank? He Goes to Hollywood's Two Tribes, which was also a subtle sort of take on the Cold War rivalry between those two powers.
Yeah. I like the way the film, and there's no spoilers in this because I take it everybody has watched this, and that's why they're looking at seeing a new take on this in terms of angles and new footage. But I like the way it ended. I think that the ending was better than the original. With certainly with the song choice, should we just say no spoilers there? I do urge you to watch the film. What do you think of the song? We won't say what the song choice is, but I think that was much better.
Yeah. Again, I think just that sort of moving ending, leaving on that note, I thought, yeah.
Does Rocky V now need an ultimate director's cut? Because in the 6 original films, Rocky Balboa, Creed, you could argue is a new series, but is it because it's still part of the Rocky franchise? But does Rocky V need it?
Even at the time, 30 years ago, they were saying Rocky IV was a film too far, and 5 and 6 were just way too far. I mean, there used to be, I think, an idea that in movies, trilogy is the maximum you should do for a film. Again, I actually enjoyed Rocky IV at the time, the original. It might normally have been a film too far, but because they brought that Cold War angle into it, and it was at the height of the Cold War, younger viewers probably don't understand it or appreciate the significance of it at the time that we probably did. I can give them a pass for bringing Rocky IV out. I think it did have quite an important cultural impact. I was interested to read that Rocky IV was the highest grossing sports movie for 24 years. So despite
what beat it?
The Blind Side.
Oh wow! So that's fairly recent.
despite the criticism it got at the time, I mean, it was well received at the box office. So yeah.
Brilliant. So just final thoughts then. My final thoughts are definitely give it a watch. Compare it to what you remember from the original cut. It's definitely worth your viewing if you are a Rocky fan. If you're not a Rocky fan, and you do want to watch it for its 80s nostalgia and so on and so forth, give it a watch. I definitely think it's worth watching. It's a different take, and why wouldn't you? You know. So if you're a Rocky fan, you need to watch it. Put it that way, and let us know what your opinions are. Ra, what about yourself?
I disagree with you that if you're into 80s nostalgia, like I said, because some of it important Cold War sort of propaganda was cut from it, maybe don't watch it if you're into the 80s nostalgia. However, if you like 80s glam rock music, then yeah, it's well worth watching. Otherwise, yeah, if you're a Rocky fan or a boxing movie fan, for sure, it's well worth watching.
Good stuff. Thank you, Ra. I'll catch up with you soon, no doubt, as well. And you can catch us on the next press conferences and interviews. And hope you enjoyed this, and you go out and watch Rocky 4, the ultimate cut, and hopefully you enjoy it like me, or you want to discuss more about the 80s nostalgia like Ra. So it's worth a discussion, isn't it? But thank you so much, and we'll catch up with you soon. Cheers.
Many thanks. Speak to you soon.
Yo, if you enjoyed the video, feel free to hit the like, subscribe, and share. As always, if you want to support us to the next level, head over to the patreon.com/ThaBoxingVoice. We have tons of exclusive from Border Wars, Entitled, betting shows, the list goes on and on and on. But in addition to that, if you guys have questions for fighters, trainers, and promoters, this is where you can submit them. We will run out, get these questions answered, and put it back on the show just for you guys. Appreciate it. Peace.